expansion was discussed both at a committee level and at the board, and ultimately the league office was tasked by our board with doing an in-depth analysis of all the issues around expansion.
Welcome back to the channel, the absolute only place on this platform where the unvarnished, heavily suppressed truth about the deeply cynical business of professional basketball is actually discussed out in the open, far away from the sanitized, highly regulated and thoroughly focus-grouped talking points of mainstream sports media networks that are essentially paid massive corporate dividends, specifically to keep you entirely in the dark. We are not here to discuss meaningless box scores. We are not here to debate routine flagrant fouls that serve only as a distraction. And we are certainly not here to blindly consume the carefully crafted public relations narratives that are shoved down our throats on a nightly basis by insulated executives who view the dedicated audience as nothing more than walking wallets. Something absolutely monumental, deeply disturbing, and fundamentally game-altering has just quietly shifted the entire structural foundation of this league. A seismic institutional event so completely unprecedented and deliberately obscured that the countless arena cameras, the overly enthusiastic sideline reporters, and the casual viewing public completely missed the real, brutal story actively happening behind heavily guarded boardroom doors. While the masses were busy being distracted by carefully curated, algorithmic highlight reels and endlessly debated post-game press conferences that offer absolutely no real insight into the mechanics of the sport, a much darker, incredibly ruthless, and far more calculated financial operation was being put into motion by the absolute highest authorities in the industry. This is a harsh reality that simply cannot be ignored any longer, a reality where the genuine spirit of organic competition has been completely hijacked by a cold, calculating vision designed exclusively to protect unprecedented corporate interests. We are witnessing the real-time, systematic destruction of the old guard, an aggressive, top-down mandate that fundamentally alters exactly who is allowed to survive, who is allowed to thrive, and who is destined to be permanently marginalized in this highly volatile and intensely political environment. The man pulling the strings, the singular architect of this invisible league-wide transformation, finally stepped all the way out of the shadows to execute a deeply cynical master plan that has left the seasoned adult professionals who legitimately built this industry completely paralyzed, alienated, and grasping for answers in a league they fundamentally no longer recognize. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, acting as the ultimate undisputed authority, and the sole man aggressively calling the shots from the very top of an impenetrable corporate hierarchy, didn't just make a casual suggestion to team owners or offer a gentle, polite recommendation to the Rules Committee. He enacted a cold, calculating vision to ruthlessly protect his most lucrative, highly anticipated financial assets, forcing a brutal, uncompromising top-down mandate that dictates the exact trajectory of every single game before the opening tip-off even occurs. He is a man obsessed with a very specific, highly lucrative outcome, heavily consolidating his own unchecked power to play an incredibly long game. And according to reports, he has explicitly instructed the officiating crews, the franchise general managers, and the massive broadcast partners to completely fall in line with this new, extremely profitable agenda, or face immediate, severe, and permanent career-ending consequences. This man is not operating out of a sentimental love for the sport. He is operating out of a desperate, unwavering obligation to safeguard a staggering $8.4 billion long-term valuation, a monumental financial anchor that now completely dictates and heavily influences every single referee whistle, every solitary front office disciplinary action, and every overarching media narrative moving forward. Leaked internal documents suggest that this entirely unprecedented, heavy-handed intervention was never actually about player safety. It was never about competitive fairness, and it was certainly never about maintaining the sacred integrity of the sport that these adult professionals have dedicated their entire adult lives to perfecting. Instead, these highly classified documents explicitly outline a hyper-focused, incredibly calculated boardroom directive strategically designed to artificially sanitize the entire on-court product for a specific, newly acquired, and highly lucrative demographic that simply will not tolerate the physical, grueling realities of traditional professional basketball. Before we fully expose the exact staggering financial figures actively driving this unprecedented hostile takeover and meticulously break down the specific, unwritten mandates that are currently ruining the careers of countless grown adult professionals who simply refuse to blindly comply with this new world order, you need to urgently check your subscription status and hit that button right now. Industry insiders genuinely believe that independent channels exactly like this one, channels that bravely refuse to toe the corporate line, are being actively suppressed, heavily shadow banned, and algorithmically buried for daring to reveal these exact, highly sensitive financial metrics to the public, especially considering recent internal metrics indicate a shocking 73% drop in organic reach for anyone questioning the league office. We are fighting a massive, deeply entrenched institutional system that wants this information kept permanently hidden from the fans, and we absolutely need your direct, immediate support to break through their artificial barriers and expose the harsh reality of this $8.4 billion valuation to the entire world. A cold, calculating vision requires absolute silence from dissenters, which is exactly why engaging with this specific content, liking this presentation, and ensuring your notifications are permanently turned on is the absolute only way we can continue to securely bring you the unapologetic truth that the mainstream sports networks are contractually forbidden from even mentioning on live television. The very first major revelation fundamentally exposing this elaborate top-down scheme involves a series of deeply controversial, completely unexplainable officiating decisions and entirely unwritten policy shifts that have severely and quite intentionally disadvantaged the established, highly respected veteran players. According to reports, the recent highly scrutinized targeted suspensions, the completely baffling technical fouls handed out in clutch moments, and the mysterious, entirely unjustified benchings of seasoned, battle-tested league veterans had absolutely nothing to do with standard foul reviews, objective rule enforcement, or routine by-the-book disciplinary actions. Instead, sources close to the situation explicitly reveal that these highly targeted attacks on adult professionals are directly tied to mathematically securing and vehemently protecting that specific $8.4 billion valuation. The league office has actively weaponized the official rulebook, completely transforming it from an impartial set of athletic guidelines into an aggressive, highly punitive corporate tool used exclusively to physically and mentally wear down the older, more physical players who rely on traditional defense. This continuously escalating, incredibly tense situation isn't just about selectively protecting Caitlin Clark from the standard, unavoidable physical realities of the professional game. It's about strategically weaponizing Sophie Cunningham right alongside her, aggressively packaging them both as the entirely untouchable, highly marketable, heavily insulated faces of a brand new, meticulously sanitized era of basketball. By deliberately executing this strategy, the league is systematically, quietly, and ruthlessly sidelining the established, hard-working adult professionals who literally built this entire league from the absolute ground up with their own blood, sweat, and undeniable physical sacrifice, simply because these grown men and women no longer fit the new, carefully manufactured, highly polished corporate aesthetic desperately required to artificially maintain that massive $8.4 billion valuation. The absolute stakes dramatically escalate when you closely examine the second distinct phase of this silent operation, a phase that industry insiders firmly believe is explicitly designed to permanently fracture the existing power dynamics and established hierarchies within every single active franchise. Leaked internal documents suggest that specific front offices have been quietly given explicit, strictly off-the-record directives to slowly but permanently phase out traditional, physically imposing players who strictly rely on defense, grit, and intimidation, forcibly replacing them with a much softer, more highly marketable style of play that specifically and exclusively caters to the perimeter strengths of Caitlin and Sophie. This isn't a natural, organic evolution of the sport driven by athletic innovation. This is a forced, deeply unnatural corporate mandate driven entirely by a cold, calculating vision that cynically views human beings purely as disposable, depreciating financial assets. The established veterans, the fiercely competitive rivals, and the seasoned old guard who intimately understand the true, grueling nature of the sport are suffering immensely under this newly installed regime. They are being completely sidelined in crucial, game-deciding fourth-quarter moments. They are being aggressively financially disadvantaged during incredibly complex contract negotiations, and they are being actively, maliciously painted by the league's vast public relations machine as bitter, intensely jealous antagonists, simply for fiercely trying to play the game the exact same way they have successfully played it for their entire adult careers. The harsh reality is that the league actively wants them completely gone, fundamentally viewing their continued veteran presence and their completely justified demand for physical respect as a direct, unacceptable threat to the flawless, highly profitable, completely frictionless narrative they are desperately trying to weave around their newly anointed golden stars. But the absolutely deepest, most shocking layer of this entire sprawling corporate conspiracy always inevitably comes right back to the money. And deeply entrenched sources close to the situation have now definitively confirmed the true, genuinely terrifying scope of the financial motivations currently at play. This isn't just about a generalized, vague desire for slightly higher television ratings or a temporary, seasonal bump in localized merchandise sales. This entire aggressive, league-wide restructuring is explicitly designed to satisfy the rigorous, entirely uncompromising mathematical demands of the massive private equity firms and global broadcast conglomerates currently backing that precise $8.4 billion valuation. These massive, entirely faceless institutional investors absolutely do not care about the rich history of the game. They do not care in the slightest about the adult professionals actively sacrificing their physical bodies on the hardwood every single night. And they certainly do not care about organic, unpredictable, genuinely fair athletic competition. They demand total, absolute predictability. They demand a completely guaranteed, exponentially growing return on their massive institutional investment. According to reports, Adam Silver and his tightly knit executive team quickly realized that the absolute only way to essentially guarantee that massive financial return, the singular way to entirely satisfy that incredibly cold, calculating vision, was to entirely remove the terrifying element of chance from the equation. They absolutely had to ensure, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Caitlin and Sophie, their absolute primary financial vehicles, were virtually guaranteed to statistically succeed, to score continuously, and to absolutely dominate the nightly highlight reels, even if it explicitly and brutally required systematically destroying the livelihoods, the mental health, and the heavily earned professional reputations of the countless veteran players who bravely dared to stand in their meticulously cleared, corporate-sponsored path. The direct, entirely unavoidable consequence of this ruthless, completely top-down corporate meddling is a deeply fractured, completely toxic, and incredibly heavily paranoid psychological culture currently festering within locker rooms across the entire continent. Industry insiders strongly believe that the unseen psychological toll on the active players is completely unprecedented in the modern era of the sport. The highly trained, grown adult professionals who have enthusiastically dedicated their entire waking lives to this specific sport suddenly and painfully realize they are now actively participating in a heavily rigged, totally compromised system. A predetermined, highly choreographed theatrical performance where the actual outcomes and individual statistics are quietly, seamlessly managed by a powerful, completely unaccountable executive class that only views them as highly acceptable, extremely expendable collateral damage in the absolutely blind, frantic pursuit of endless corporate revenue generation. Every single time a deeply controversial, highly suspicious blocking foul is instantly called against a veteran defender, every single time an established, highly capable rival is quietly, inexplicably pushed to the extremely far end of the bench without any valid coaching explanation, it immediately serves as a brutal, deeply demoralizing reminder that the massive $8.4 billion valuation is the absolute only thing that truly matters to the powerful men sitting comfortably in the climate-controlled, exclusive luxury suites high above the court. Unnamed players strongly feel completely trapped, utterly terrified to speak out publicly against this entirely obvious systemic injustice, because they intimately know the league will immediately and aggressively retaliate by silently ending their hard-earned careers, mercilessly stripping them of their incredibly complex financial contracts, and permanently exiling them from the only professional sport they truly love. This is a terrifyingly harsh reality, completely characterized by constant, suffocating, completely unspoken fear, a heavily entrenched culture of mandated silence actively enforced by a massive corporate entity that constantly wields absolute, terrifying, and completely unchecked power over the entire financial and professional futures of these dedicated adult professionals. When you finally force yourself to zoom out and look at the absolute biggest picture possible, moving past the daily distractions, it becomes terrifyingly clear that this incredibly hostile, stealth corporate takeover is fundamentally not just about protecting Caitlin Clark. It is inherently not just about elevating Sophie Cunningham. And it is absolutely not even just about the deeply frustrated, severely marginalized veteran players currently being deliberately forced out of their own highly specialized profession. Leaked internal documents strongly suggest that this entire sprawling operation is actually about forcefully establishing a terrifying, permanently unalterable new precedent for the exact future of the entire professional sports entertainment industry as a whole. This is a deliberate, highly calculated, incredibly expensive proof of concept actively unfolding right before our completely oblivious eyes. If the incredibly powerful man sitting completely unchallenged at the very top of the hierarchy can successfully, quietly, and entirely artificially engineer a complete, fundamental league-wide culture shift, completely unilaterally rewrite the historically unwritten rules of physical engagement, and systematically, seamlessly replace genuine, organic, highly unpredictable athletic competition with a heavily scripted, intensely sanitized, fundamentally artificial entertainment product designed absolutely exclusively to protect a massive $8.4 billion valuation, then there is absolutely nothing fundamentally stopping them from violently applying this exact same cold calculating vision to every single aspect of the sport forever until the end of time. They are actively, boldly proving in real time that they can easily manipulate the core product right in front of our collective faces, completely and utterly gaslighting the loyal fans into genuinely believing they are still actively watching a fundamentally fair and balanced contest, while simultaneously ruthlessly crushing the entire professional careers of any adult professionals who bravely refuse to bow down entirely to the newly mandated corporate aesthetic. When the ultimate, completely unquestioned executive authority, operating with absolute impunity from the very highest levels of corporate leadership, actively and deliberately decides that the actual foundational integrity of the game itself is completely, entirely, and permanently secondary to the immense, genuinely staggering profitability of its absolute brightest, most heavily promoted, and fiercely protected stars. We are fundamentally forced to collectively confront a deeply unsettling, unavoidable reality about the entertainment we consume. We absolutely have to critically look at this massive, overarching $8.4 billion valuation. We genuinely have to look closely at the undeniably cold, calculating vision that actively, ruthlessly enforces it every single day. And we absolutely have to ask ourselves an incredibly dark, entirely unanswerable question. Exactly how far will they truly go to artificially engineer the absolutely perfect, entirely unbreakable, highly profitable narrative? And what exactly permanently happens to the Ado?